Let's do this thing. Hello, everybody, and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today's Thursday, the 16th of July, 2026. Let's get right to it. I want to talk about how China's AI stack is catching up to the West. And as always, we've got a great lineup of guests today. Initially, we have David Jenkins. He's the Chief Product and Tech Officer at Openmarkets. He's going to join us to talk about how intelligent financial infrastructure will help financial businesses operate more efficiently and expand market access. Following that, we welcome Ayush Soota, founder and CEO at Paathz with a Z, to discuss how human-centered AI hiring platforms will help hospitality businesses make faster, better informed talent decisions. And we'll keep going. We have 6 guests today. Next, we will talk to Jennifer Chen, CEO at Muse AI, to cover how agentic content operations will help global brands work faster and scale without adding complexity. And then Rachiket, Arya, head of AI at Aspire, should be a fascinating conversation with him as well. We'll talk about how AI native financial infrastructure will help businesses operate with more intelligence, flexibility, and control. Later in the program, we'll be joined by Jose Florido, Chief Growth Officer at Magnific, to explore how AI-powered creative platforms are helping companies turn creative work into a faster, more collaborative, and more scalable operating system. And finally, Yifan, founder and CEO at Red Date Technology, will join us to talk about how trusted identity and interoperable digital infrastructure will enable businesses to use autonomous financial agents. But before we get to all of our guests and some news, let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Twilio. Twilio is the secure and scalable platform to build amazing customer engagement without the complexity, with the AI-driven workflows you need to connect. They are trusted by over 300,000 businesses. It is the platform that simply makes more possible. Visit Twilio.com to start building today. Okay, let's get to some news. Look, I said I wanted to talk about how China's AI stack is catching the West. And, we've spoken, I think, at the beginning of the week as well, just how China takes this sort of deliberate, moderated, sort of long-term approach to everything that they're doing. And remember, in all cases, that part of this response in the AI space, and particularly in the AI stack space, is in response to the bans of NVIDIA chips, and also, frankly, to the ban of some of the foundational models that were originally developed in the United States and China, just incentivize them to do things that they may not have otherwise done. Anyway, let's get to some of the details here. DeepSeek, a company that we've spoken about a bunch, and frankly, we talked about it when they raised their first approximately $7 billion at a valuation of $50 billion. And now they're looking like they're going to raise another maybe $7.4 billion, depending on FX rates, at a valuation of about $74 billion. And remember, this is only weeks after its first external financing. The company is also considering filing for an IPO on Shanghai's Star Market before the end of 2026, although the financing terms and the listing timetable remain preliminary. And remember, we have spent a lot of time on our sister show, AGTP, talking about how OpenAI and Anthropic also want to list on the exchange in the United States. But we think that what's happening in the rest of the market for artificial intelligence, the USA, may potentially get in their way. None of the same problems exist in China. This company can list essentially whenever it wants, particularly if it's going to list in Shanghai. Let's talk about the pace of this fundraising. This reflects, in my mind, a fundamental shift and a fundamental change in DeepSeek's position. And again, I just think what's the right word here? It's related to everything else that's going on in the AI stack business in China. It built its reputation initially, right? You remember this when it first came out at the beginning of January 2025, on producing highly capable models with lower reported costs than leading American developers. That would be Anthropic, that would be OpenAI, and frankly, that would be Grok, and all the stuff that Microsoft is producing, and even some of the things that Facebook is producing. But DeepSeek is now hiring heavily. They're expanding their data center capacity. So again, handling compute in a way that maybe Anthropic and maybe OpenAI have not been able to do in the same way. And they're reportedly designing an inference chip as well. You can see here how they're just getting involved in the entire stack. Competing at the frontier level still requires an enormous amount of capital. And that's what this is proving, a little bit at least. And you remember when they first came out, their initial model they said was developed with like $10 million, just a very small amount of money. And as Martin likes to say, when they announced that, you saw the market capitalization of a whole bunch of AI companies. And frankly, the entire NASDAQ kind of get killed. And the reason why was, whoa, this is kind of shocking. How can this company do the same thing that these foundational models are doing, or at least appear to be doing the same thing that these foundational models are doing at such a low cost? Okay. And they found out that their model was extremely efficient. And at the same time, this is why we're talking about the entire stack, not just about DeepSeek on its own. China's semiconductor strategy at the beginning was just focused on Huawei. At least that's what most people were talking about, right? Huawei, again, a very large, very sophisticated, very sort of technologically advanced company that produces stuff across the electronic stack. And of course, a very good relationship with the government in Beijing. And the government, of course, encourages them and subsidizes them to a certain extent to create competing architecture and competing chips with NVIDIA. But now, the entire AI stack in China is broadening beyond just Huawei. Shanghai startup Dongfeng Shuanxin, also known as DFSX, has unveiled their own chip, the DF, which is the DF and the DFSX, right, for Dongfeng 1000. This AI processor is manufactured on a mature 14 nanometer process. Why do we even care about the size of it? It's really just to say that it's kind of an old-fashioned process that they're using. And this is important, right? Because we're always going to talk, at least in the current environment in China, that they're existing in kind of a constrained environment. That even that the technology itself, just the pure tech, is not up to the same snuff that it is in the United States and in the rest of the West. But they're finding some ways to make the outcome, and that's the only thing that really matters here, as effective and as efficient and as important as the outcome for the frontier models in the United States by just using a different methodology. Their approach on this places memory close to the close to the computing layer through something that's called 3D stacking. It reduces the movement of data that often limits AI inference performance, right? And we've talked about this too. One of the things that AMD said, and this was a few months ago, right? The CEO of AMD said they expect to sell many more CPUs because up until now, they have been using one CPU for like 4 or 5 chips that NVIDIA produces on the GPU side. But they're intending now to do a one-for-one thing. And it's the CPU itself that actually is that communication layer between the GPU and another GPU. And that's where the inference comes into play. But what they're saying here, at least at Dongfeng, at DF, is that they're reducing the movement of data by putting the memory closer to the chip itself. And the company says that the chip and its supply chain are entirely domestic. So think about this too. When you think about where NVIDIA is designing and producing its chips, it could run into problems because it's not entirely domestic. They don't control the entire input and output on their supply chain. And at some point, this could become problematic depending upon how things developed with the relations between China and the United States. The technical claims remain largely untested outside of DFSX. They say that this chip that they're producing, the DF100, can deliver 520 teraflops of really great performance and 6.4 terabytes per second of memory bandwidth. And those headline numbers do not reveal power consumption. We don't know what the power consumption is. This is really, really important, actually, because the lower power that you need, the more of these chips that you can use at the same scale. And we're not really sure about the manufacturing yield either, or how good it is at running competing AI models. But to be fair, at some level, that doesn't really matter that much. The chip is evidence of a serious architectural approach that's different than what's happening at NVIDIA and in the rest of the West, rather than the fact that it can completely replace what NVIDIA is doing. Almost as importantly is DFSX plans to launch its DF2000 soon, in the fourth quarter of 2026. That's 2 quarters away from now, with the second generation chip, that's the DF2000, expected to deliver twice the performance of the DF100 and surpass NVIDIA's H200. Why would we even mention the H200 here? Well, because that's the only chip now that NVIDIA is legally allowed to sell or structurally allowed to sell in China. And if the DF2000, can surpass NVIDIA's H200, then NVIDIA may sell no chips in China. And I think one of the reasons why this is so important is because if you put these two just sort of examples together, these two developments, right? The development of the DFSX chip And the DeepSeek actually raising another $7.4 billion. That what did we say the number was? 70 something $billion valuation. Yeah, at a $74 billion valuation. So 50% higher than their previous valuation. This is China trying to build a more complete domestic AI system. DeepSeek on this side represents the model and application layer, really straightforward stuff. And DFSX represents a growing group of China chip companies attempting to build an ecosystem, right, that is trying to compete with the rest of the models in the United States. Capital, government policy, and domestic procurement are beginning to connect those layers into a national industrial strategy. And again, just getting back to what we always say about China, they're not in a rush. But here's the thing, and I learned this when I was in high school from one of my favorite teachers. You want to go as fast as possible, but you don't want to rush, because when you rush, you could create accidents. But when you move quickly, you can actually get some really great stuff done. So let's ask this question. Why does DeepSeek actually need to raise so much money now? Right? And because their earlier efficiency gains reduced the cost of developing individual models. That was clear, and that's why they could come out with that model so quickly at the beginning of 2025. They did not remove the cost of maintaining a frontier AI company, though. And their business, just like every other model business that has to train the model and then create the output for inference, still needs computing clusters, data centers, and also highly paid researchers. Again, we talked about this actually on AGTP last night, I believe. Building the core of one of these foundational models is no longer like unknown science. But to do it and to keep doing it and to keep doing it well requires a decent research department and a bunch of people to actually do all the training and stuff that it requires to do. And in that vein, DeepSeek has said they plan to double their workforce and expand work on their agentic AI system, right? Agentic systems consume substantially more inference capacity because they perform repeated model calls. This is why it's such a different business than just having a chatbot out there, right? So ChatGPT or even just DeepSeek's chat business, you just ask it a question, it gives you an answer. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer. But once you have agentic systems as part of your core offering, they're going to consume a lot more inference capacity, which is going to mean that they're going to need a lot more chips, a lot more data center stuff, and a lot more compute. And to do that, their models are going to have to get way more efficient than they already are, because the chip capacity that they have, again, is not equal to the power of the chips that NVIDIA is creating, at least not yet. But you see how quickly, and again, they're moving fast, but they're not in a hurry, right? But you see how quickly that the Chinese and that this particular company, DFSX, is moving from their 1,000 chip to the 2,000 chip. That 1,000 chip is already out. It's already being used. People are already like employing it. But the 2,000 is meant to come out in the fourth quarter. That's only like 4 months or 5 months from now. This is really important. DeepSeek is also trying to build some of its own chips as well. This is not a static environment, not a static ecosystem at any level. They're going to have to pay them stuff too. And DeepSeek is also reportedly recruiting chip engineers to develop its own inference processor. So they're trying to create very similar, but maybe like in reverse, to what NVIDIA has trying to do. So NVIDIA has been in the chip business forever, and NVIDIA says they want to be sort of a full stack artificial intelligence factory business. And it appears that DeepSeek is trying to do the same thing, but trying to do it in reverse. Designing a chip, as we know, requires a lot of investment well before any kind of like commercial production begins. And to be fair, it's not clear to me that these individual companies, although we did see Google say it was going to produce more TPUs, right, their tensor processing units, and then try to sell them to the rest of the market if the rest of the market wanted to differentiate away from NVIDIA. It's not clear to me whether DeepSeek will want to produce this chip and then sell it to the rest of the Chinese or just compete with the rest of the chip makers in China. But it would make sense to me that they would try to do that, right? Particularly if they want to create enough capacity and enough sort of economies of scale to produce these chips at the right level. But again, we know that designing a chip requires big investment well before commercial production begins. So it's not clear when this chip is going to come into production, but I don't think DeepSeek is going to give up, which also means that DeepSeek is probably going to continue to be in the capital raising business. And this fundraising does suggest that DeepSeek's low-cost reputation should not be interpreted going forward for sure of a low capitally intensive business model. Model efficiency may improve the economics of each computation while total demand continues to grow, at least in my mind. And if that's the case, I do believe they're going to be in the business of continuing to raise money. But here's why that's significant as well. We have spent a lot of time looking at OpenAI and Anthropic and just at the massive valuation. Just to be clear on this $7 billion is going to be raised at a potentially $74 billion valuation. The most recent round for OpenAI and for Anthropic is almost at $1 trillion. So more than 10 times the valuation of DeepSeek. 10 times. More than 10 times. It's more like 12 point something times. So there's a lot of room for market expansion here. A lot of room for market cap expansion, excuse me. So they have a lot of room to raise money. Yeah, so don't forget about that. And what does this valuation tell us about DeepSeek's role inside of China as well? Again, we've spoken about this in the context of the United States. These big foundational models are not being funded like regular venture capital or regular software startup businesses. They're being funded like infrastructure businesses. Again, go back to it. It's like the railroads and stuff like that, right? And that's the big difference here. And this is just as true for DeepSeek. Its investors include Tencent, so one of the biggest and most influential and most well-connected to the Chinese government companies in China, CATL, and China's National AI Fund. And you can see that's where the tie-in with the government is, and that's another reason why this is really important. And also, the founder of the company, Liang Wenfeng, also remains a major source of capital for the business. Now, that's important too. You want this guy to have skin in the game to make sure that he's going to continue to be involved in what's happening here. The company also has become strategically important inside of China because it gives them, not out of nowhere, because it's been in development for a while now, but a respected domestic foundation model developer, while access to some advanced American technology remains uncertain. I mean, to be fair, we've seen Fable 5 from Anthropic. They're just going back and forth on how people are actually going to have access to this model inside of the United States. The people that actually do have access to it, is it going to be a subscription? Is it going to be included in the subscription? Is it just going to be API only? They keep extending the deadlines. And to be fair, if it's not clear who's going to have access to that model and how that access is going to be granted in the US of A, how is that going to work for people outside of the country? It's just unstable and it's unsure. And having DeepSeek out there gives the Chinese government actually something to be proud of. Now, if they list on the market in Singapore, it also give DeepSeek access to China's public capital markets and also provide domestic investors inside of China with direct exposure to a major foundation model company, which again is important to China. You see this with Menace AI as well. They want to make sure that their domestic IP stays domestic and that the people that benefit from that IP are actually the Chinese people and the Chinese government themselves and the government in Beijing. This is also really important. This fits right into the same sort of mindset infrastructure that they had around Manus, and I don't think this is frankly going to be any different as with DeepSeek. Now, it's likely, although unsure, but current discussions point toward a filing in 2026, so for an IPO in 2026, even though no final thing has been announced. But again, when this stuff leaks out of the Beijing government space, you can be pretty sure that it's going to happen. And the valuation here also reflects some scarcity, which is important to note. Let me just 1 second. China has several strong model developers inside. We know them, right? We've talked about Quen. We've talked about some of the other models there. We've talked about Manus. But DeepSeek has achieved unusual international recognition for its technical work and its open releases. That actually ends up being pretty important to them as well. So this carries like a little bit of extra significance, I think, and that's actually kind of cool for, give me a second, for DeepSeek. I think I need to shut this thing down. So, and why, let's just really quickly just talk about like why this DFSX thing matters. And it just matters because there are multiple chip people here, and having more than one company develop multiple chips, I think is actually going to be really important in China. We're going to welcome our first guest, but before we do that, let's get to our second sponsor. Boomi is the data activation company for artificial intelligence. It powers the agentic enterprise by bringing data to life across your business. Trusted by over 30,000 customers and supported by a network of 800 plus partners, Boomi helps organizations of all sizes achieve agility, efficiency, and innovation at scale. Martin, let's bring in our first guest, David Jenkins, the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Openmarkets. David, I'm doing well. You can hear me okay, yes? Super duper. Okay, let's bring you in. Okay, David. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We wanted to have you on to talk about how intelligent financial infrastructure can help financial businesses operate more efficiently and expand market access. And before we do that in detail, tell us a little bit more about Openmarkets, please.
Sure, Openmarkets. So we're a large Australian execution and clearing broker. We're about the third largest in the market, and we clear a substantial amount of trades every single day.
Cool.
And really, our franchise has been equities to date, but we're looking very firmly at moving that into the digital asset space, which is our next step, really.
Super. And so how are financial services companies approaching artificial intelligence automation, and where are they moving into sort of real operational use?
Oh, look, I think there's a number of different elements to AI, both operationally and then also from a client-facing perspective. So operationally, it can improve the quality of the information you're getting out of unstructured data that you might be feeding into wealth management and advisory platforms. We're definitely using it in that space.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a lot of filings and documents that arrive still in very old formats that we can actually extract quite accurately and feed in from an operational perspective. It saves a lot of time and a lot of manual processing. But then also on the client side, that flows directly onto the quality of advice that our clients are giving to their clients. And from that point of view, they can use artificial intelligence to dramatically scale the amount of clients they could advise, for example, which is where we see a big opportunity in the market, is actually scaling financial advice using AI.
So this is you providing information to other financial advisors that then use that information to increase their business, which then feed back into you from a trading and execution standpoint, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly right.
And when you... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, when you look at it, I mean, there's a large number of people out there and a big intergenerational wealth transfer that's going on, and there just isn't enough advisors to cover them all. So, I mean, this is a huge opportunity. I mean, we're really looking at an amazing set of tools that can help bring quality financial advice to people who just are currently unadvised.
Why do you think there aren't enough people? And why do you think there aren't enough people actually to handle this? Is it they just haven't been trained properly enough? When I was in the financial services business, everybody wanted to be in the financial services business. Has that changed in the last 6 or 7 years? Or is it just the case that this wealth transfer that's taking place is so massive that there simply aren't enough people to handle it?
Look, I think it's the increase in retail participation in financial markets has grown dramatically. I think the barrier at which a financial advisor might find a client able to be sustained is also higher than what a lot of these clients may actually be willing to accept. So it's a combination of a number of different factors, like regulation that makes advising smaller clients unattractive. The growth in retail participation in markets has exploded, so therefore there's a lot more people who are financially savvy and able to run their own portfolios. So I think it's really a combination of those factors. And also the trading or the investment styles of the younger generation tend to be a little bit more self-directed. And, therefore the nature of advice changes somewhat as well. I mean, they're not going to necessarily see their financial advisor, right? I mean, they're more likely to engage with tools than they are to engage with people. So...
Do you get the sense, and I'm really curious about this, do you get the sense, because I presume all this is going to happen, you can see me sort of scrolling through things right now because you can see where I'm going to go with this, but I see the way my friend cohort shops. And it's really just like scrolling through things. And you're right, they almost never talk to anybody in a store. They're constantly looking at stuff online. Do you think the kind of wealth management business and the investment business, particularly from the retail side, is going to end up looking more like sort of online e-commerce shopping than it does like today's sort of wealth management and advisory business, in the sense that you go into an office or you talk to your financial advisor, get advice, they implement it for you, and then they send you a report back?
Yeah, look, I really think it will. And the reason for that is not so much that speculation increases. It's more that the frictional barriers of getting in and out of positions are much less. So, for example, your portfolio may traditionally get rebalanced once every 6 months, maybe once every 12 months when you're dealing with people, but you can rebalance that on the fly when things start to get tokenized and when AI starts to get involved. So really, I think it's lowering frictional barriers that makes it just easier to access different types of products. And I myself am not a big fan of gamification of markets, so I'm not really on board with the idea that we turn it into a Uber Eats. But still, I think it'll be a lot easier to get in and out of products and products of different types.
Are there certain places where automation is actually accelerating really fast and other places where it's just too hard to do? And if that's the case, like, what does it look like to the customers that you are serving when they see things get served to them from an AI basis? How is it different than the way they were getting information or advice before that?
Oh, look, it's really changing a lot. I like to call it kind of like a two-speed adoption. I mean, you have one speed, which is the digital natives. They're already using LLMs over digital rails. They're pushing the limits on that really hard with multi-agent and things like that. You've got very sophisticated hedge funds also doing the same. But then you've got a large contingent of people who are still investing in the other ways where they talk to their financial advisor and rebalance once every now and then. So I consider that there's two speeds out there. I mean, gradually it's, I think, only going in one direction. But there are digital natives pushing it really hard. And then there are people who are a little bit more risk adverse. I mean, I myself at first was risk averse when I heard about the idea of putting AI on top of my wallet and on digital wallet. I just thought, wow, that sounds so dangerous. But people are doing it now, and regulators, I think, are still catching up to that fact. But
so, what changed your mind? What kind of experience did you have where you were like, okay, I can use it? I presume it's agentic AI connected to my wallet, and then in the digital investing space, I can use that agent to then make decisions for me, or at least provide decisions to me where I can have the final sort of call on whether I actually execute that thing or not.
Yeah, look, I mean, definitely that human in the loop, so to speak, is still very much a given in a lot of cases. I mean, fully automatic agentic AI, I don't think is there yet, and anyone doing that would firmly be running a huge amount of risk. But what changed my mind is just like some very, very talented people who have been in this industry for a long time spoke to me about it and said that, yes, it's happening. And I can't help but believe them. I'm just like, okay, well, if you are willing to say that, then it must be true, because you've got 20, 30 years in this industry. So I think the controls still need some maturity. Like, there is still an element of you need to put it over rails that are safe, and you need to know what safe looks like. But it is maturing very fast. And, for me, that switching point was really just some people who know what they're talking about telling me, okay, this works.
What does safe look like to you? It's a really good point, right? Because you do want to make sure that there's safety there. But I presume that part of safe is accountability as well. How do you balance like getting the efficiencies that are associated with putting artificial intelligence sort of inside the process or inside the workflow, keep it safe, but then also keep the accountability so that if the client has a question or something seems to them to go wrong, they can have someone to whom they can speak to about getting it fixed?
Yeah, look, the know your agent identity verification is a frontier topic, I must admit. I can't say that that's been solved. There are people trying to solve it, and agents have a unique signature that can be tied back to a real human like myself. So I think that is very frontier, but trust has become an enormous issue, particularly in agentic finance, where you need to be sure that the agent operating on these rails is who it says it is and actually does tie back to a decision made by a human. Where that's going, look, like I mentioned, I think it's frontier. Like, there are people definitely having a good crack at owned that market, so to speak.
And what does it look like when you introduce this to a client, in the sense that, do you run them through kind of like a training process, and do you run them through like, here's the agent, here's what it's going to do for you, here's how you can control what it does, here's how you can control like what it feels like when you're dealing with it, and here's how you can interdict when you feel like you want to do this thing on your own?
Oh, look, to be honest, we don't currently do that. Like, we have people that work through us that are on those types of frontiers, but right at the moment, we're still training people on what is a digital asset and what is a stable coin. I mean, we're not anywhere near that level yet. I mean, I know it's happening, and I know that it's happening particularly in probably less regulated circles than we fit into.
Yep.
We're not at that level yet. I mean, even Australian regulators like ASIC they released a paper recently that it covered robo-advisory, and even
Right.
they admit LLMs is frontier. Like they don't have firm guidance on that. So yeah, us ourselves, we are not doing that, but I do know that it's happening. And for us, we're still in the education phase.
So tell me more about the digital assets and how important they are starting to be in the investment process. In other words, what does it look like from a growth perspective, not just in the current generation, but in the next generation of sort of digitally native investors?
So look, if you take the bullish estimate, then it's a market that could hit $13 trillion in market cap. And there's no reason to think that that couldn't happen when you actually look at the fundamentals behind it, that you're effectively tokenizing or wrapping an existing product, or you're inventing new digital native products.
Right.
I think from the point of view of solving the frictional barriers of lowering entry points and exit points, making settlement, reducing counter reasons, beyond creating new markets where this technology really helps. But I think the common saying is that TradFi is learning from DeFi. We're not just taking DeFi as a for granted. We're taking the great pieces of it and incorporating it into all of the controls and the risks that you get as part of the TradFi world. So it's more like a merger than it is an adoption, I guess you could say.
So for my money, and again, maybe this just comes from working in Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs for so long, but I see it as a takeover. In other words, there was no way in my mind that decentralized finance was going to take over traditional finance, because it doesn't have the infrastructure necessary to do that, nor the level of maturity, nor frankly the assets under management. I mean, if I'm just looking at coin market cap right now, just every single coin that trades right now has a market cap of $2 trillion. And I know that FX trades about $9 trillion a day. That's just foreign exchange, right? So these things are not even close to each other. What are the things, though, maybe that traditional finance is taking from the decentralized finance world that they're learning from it, and they can then incorporate in and make this takeover, as I would call it, more effective?
Yeah, so I think one of the key ones there is capital mobility, like not leaving cash sitting idle for things like capital calls or in reserves. It's being able to move collateral in and out of different positions more seamlessly, I'd say, is one of the really key value adds. And beyond that, also the other things that are regularly cited, like reducing counterparty risk, being able to move money globally. Like the friction just on moving money globally is significant. Like trying to fund trades and accounts overseas still can take 2 to 3 days. Whereas if you can move that money instantly, then you've enabled the free movement of capital. So I think those are some of the reasons why institutions are looking at it. And like you said, I feel like they're taking the best parts of DeFi, because I still feel that TradFi is not incorporating DeFi. Like I don't think there's anyone out there who would face a DeFi protocol directly from a $50 million portfolio. Like it's still a risky world, but they will definitely take protocols, whether they be permissioned or permissionless, and actually incorporate some of the regulation into those protocols.
Do you have demand from your client base that's saying to you, we want to have tokenized assets, we want to have RWA in some way, shape, or form, so that it doesn't restrict our ability to invest in things where we do want to exist? Or is it just something where we feel like that DeFi is doing that so that traditional finance companies actually have to participate in it? Or are you seeing real demand for it, and now that's why these things have to be created?
Look, I think there's real demand overseas. Like I don't want to talk from purely an Australian perspective, because I feel like we are a little bit laggard in the adoption. I think there is definitely demand, certainly out of Asia, particularly around getting access to markets where traditionally you may have found that quite difficult. So huge demand out of those markets. I think definitely the US is also forging the way in tokenized assets. I mean, you've seen the IPO from firms such as Securitize, that went exceptionally well. And there's huge amounts of liquidity tied up in the BlackRock funds and Franklin Templeton funds that have been digitized. Australia, I guess you could say, look, we've done a bunch of pilots, part sponsored by the government. I'd say the demand here is nascent. I mean, I think, like I mentioned before, we're still in the education phase. There are things that you can do today in traditional finance that mimic somewhat what you could do in digital assets. So I feel like we still need to prove to people what is the value add here, what exactly the problem you're solving.
Yeah, because that's actually my question. And again, I think it fundamentally comes out of my own experience working at Morgan and Goldman, in the sense that it never seemed to, and frankly, having friends working at Merrill Lynch, they won't like me saying this, but that was more of a retail broker, and we were more of a business broker, an institutional business. They won't like that, but that's actually a fact. But I do wonder sometimes, like, because you said the digitalization of like the BlackRock funds, which is different actually than the tokenization of it, right? Because the tokenization of it then breaks it down into really, really small pieces and allows sort of for the democratization of it, whereas the digitalization of it just makes it easier to trade. Um, I'm curious where you think stable coins fit into the ability to make the movement of money easier so that then that can impact or affect your ability to buy assets outside of your home country, regardless of where your home country is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that comes down to really the instant transfer of capital between different currencies and also jurisdictions. And using stablecoins allows you to break down those barriers so that you don't necessarily need to hold a local bank account in the US to be able to trade a US denominated product.
Right.
You can effectively just use a stablecoin for that. So I think really just the unlock there is the amount of liquidity you can bring to the market, which otherwise is quite difficult. Like I mentioned before, it can still take 2 to 3 days to clear a trade that goes in multi-currency account that needs to be domiciled offshore. And even getting a cash account in some countries can be quite difficult. So
right.
What if you could just trade synthetically using a stablecoin? That's a huge value add.
Can you talk a little bit, if you've thought about this, about what the impact of having USDC, right, or just a dollar stablecoin be? Because right now, like the dollar is the world's currency, for better or for worse. Will it stay there or not? I'm not involved in the geopolitical discussions around whether the dollar is going to stay the world's reserve currency. But it appears to me that the stable coins that are getting built are mostly dollar denominated. And
yes,
because now it's going to make it easier for people to trade using those dollars. At some point, again, I just ask this all the time because I want to understand, like, am I the only person that thinks this? But if I'm sitting in a country where I don't necessarily have a bank account, or even if I'm sitting in Australia where I do have one, but I want to buy US assets, I get a stable coin, I buy it. And then when I sell that asset, why would I sell it into fiat currency? Why wouldn't I just sell it back into that stable coin? And then why would I then turn that back into Aussie dollars or New Zealand dollars or Japanese yen if I'm just going to use that money for more investing? And then what does it mean for the currencies that no longer are getting used, if you understand what I mean?
Oh, you're not the only person thinking that. Honestly, I have been thinking about this for a while. I guess I haven't completely thought it through, but I do think it's a capital outflow risk for some countries, particularly
Agreed.
the smaller.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure they've got their heads around that yet, because you're 100% right. It is heavily tilted towards the USD. So maybe not Australia, but if you pick some of the smaller Asian countries who do have a capital outflow issues, I mean, if people start doing that, it could very, very much affect their currency itself. So I think they need to get ahead of that and actually get on the digital game with their own currencies. Otherwise, it will become a frictional barrier.
Yeah. Again, I still worry about whether, like, if you look at, and I don't want to point out like any particular country, but I mean, look at a country like Vietnam. It's growing. The economy is growing there fast. GDP is growing there really fast, but there's not a lot of like Vietnamese dong circulating around the world. And if the younger generation there wants to invest in the S&P 500 or in the NASDAQ 100 or anything or any sort of dollar denominated asset, they're going to use a stable coin to do that. Then why would they ever turn that back into Vietnamese dong? It's a thing that I worry about. Yeah.
Yeah. An opportunity there for local providers to provide local currency denominated products. Like that's quite a relatively simple thing to do when the product is digitized. So you could, for example, have a local currency denominated stocks that are offshore stocks and offer those in country and actually own your own market that way. I mean, that's one potential route. But if they don't have any plans at all to provide that sort of product, then yes, it will be US denominated products that people will likely buy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, frankly, I don't care, right? Because the dollar's always been kind of my currency, but I just do worry as some of these developing or almost developed countries, like what they're going to do, because their sovereignty is actually tied up in their currency at some level. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I mean, all of the ramifications that I haven't fully thought through, but I have thought about it when I hear some countries lagging a bit on issuing a local stablecoin, because I see it as a risk for them.
So do I. Okay. Look, thank you so much for coming in and doing this today. Love to have you back on. I love having these conversations about the sort of intersection of DeFi and TradFi. I could do this forever. Thank you again for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks very much.
Okay. Let us welcome our third supporter today, HCL Tech. HCL Tech is supercharging progress with artificial intelligence that moves beyond ambition and delivers real business impact. a recognized artificial intelligence leader trusted by global enterprises to turn technology into transformation. HCL Tech, it's supercharging progress. Martin, let's bring in our second guest today, Ayush Soota, the founder and CEO at Paathz. Ayush, how are you doing today? Can you hear me okay? It is my pleasure. It's really great to have you here. Let's get you onto the main screen.
Absolutely.
There you are. Look, again, thank you very much for doing this. We wanted to have you on because we wanted to understand how human-centered AI hiring platforms can help hospitality businesses make faster, better informed talent decisions. And before we dig into that in detail, let's get a little bit more about Paathz. Let's learn a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, thanks for having me again, Michael. So I guess what we built is Paathz is sort of this workforce intelligence platform built specifically for hospitality. It powers sort of the talent funnel end-to-end, sourcing, screening, ranking, and for everyone from a single property, restaurant, or even a cruise line to a global chain. And it isn't a chatbot bolted into an applicant tracking system. It's an intelligence layer that sits across the entire hiring stack and assists recruitment properly. What it does,
go ahead. Sorry, go
what
ahead.
it does very concretely is like it takes a candidate's CV, their video answers, their credentials, and it turns all of that into a structured skill-based profile. Then
What does that
ranks
mean? What does that mean? What's a structured skill-based profile, and how does it get ranked?
Absolutely. So how it works is like versus how typical recruitment matching happens, it's not keyword based. It uses context that matters specific to the industry. So a simple taxonomy system, property type, brand standard, skill sets associated with roles.
Yep.
And even things like location compatibility. So in a world where mobility is growing but visa regulations are still around, the ability to work in a region isn't as easy as it is, or in certain cases it's even easier.
I think that's the understatement of the century, but go ahead.
Absolutely. And we built this very fast. I mean, we've gone from a blank page to a platform running in around 8 months. Sources, screening, ranking the lot, and we had like around 30,000 users before sign up, before launch, and then another 10K in the last 2 weeks. So it's been, quite a flow of users coming in.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously the taxonomy system that we built underneath it has been, we worked with top hospitality universities to validate this. So we wanted it to kind of fit the needs of the industry entirely as well.
Got it. Why do we need, and I want you to explain this to people. I think I understand why, but why do you think we need a hiring ecosystem built specifically for hospitality? What's different here that requires it to be separated out and segmented out so that the system that you're building is specific for that and for that taxonomy?
Absolutely. See, our main concern has always been that the ability to translate soft skills across a piece of paper is not there. A typical CV cannot tell the difference, which I use this example quite a lot, but there's a huge difference, for example, between a 250-room hotel receptionist and a 55-room luxury hotel receptionist.
Yeah,
right?
the person working at the Amanpuri is not the same person working at the Holiday Inn.
Absolutely, right? It's a volume game versus, setting into the customer type game.
Exactly.
So how do you differentiate that even from a skill base? And obviously, hospitality has been one of those industries that's notoriously slow to adopt the technology. So our biggest concern is how do you frame this in an approach and build it in an approach that's easy to adopt off the bat, and then continue to modify to the standards of current technology.
How does technology help? What's the right word I'm looking for? The problem that a hospitality business has with proximity, right? In the sense that if I'm working for a software development company, if I'm working for a SaaS company, if I'm working for anything that's kind of just software based, I could literally work for a company in Silicon Valley, but still be based in Ho Chi Minh City.
Absolutely.
Right? But I cannot work for the Amanpuri unless I'm based in Phuket. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just not possible unless I'm doing software for them. But that's not exactly what you're talking about, right? You're talking literally, you said like the front desk or the reception. How do you deal with that proximity thing? And how does technology help you still find the best candidates, but that are proximate to that locale?
Absolutely. That's a great question. What's unique in this situation is the candidates exist. And the issue is like there's always a claim that hospitality has a massive labor shortage, but the reality of the situation is it's a visibility crisis. where candidates are mixed into these huge lots of job boards where you'll have 3,000-4,000 people applying to a job, but 95% don't even work in hospitality. So the
Right.
candidates that actually have the skill set are coming out of these institutes that exist. There's at least 20,000 graduates a year from Europe and another 60,000 from all the top 10 schools in Asia. So the quality of candidates is not in question. It's now the status of where to find them. And we have societies like, especially in Southeast Asia, whose natural culture is the warmth of hospitality.
Right.
And so we have that sort of sense of service and style, but the issue is, consistently finding them in that pile of, applications.
So can we do this a little bit if you don't mind? Because I've had this idea for a long time.
Mhm.
And that is, I think that every industry, like the legal industry should have this, the medical industry should have, the healthcare services industry should have this. Obviously, hospitality should have this.
Mhm.
I've always found, again, one of the problems with these big job boards, as you suggest, is that there's so much noise and so few signals, and it's hard to figure out what the signals are because they are so noisy.
Mhm.
Two things really, though. How do you get people to move off of the traditional sort of job posting sites where hospitality companies still are posting and move on to Paathz? And then how do you get the people that are looking for a job to only go to Paathz, do you know what I mean, for this job in the hospitality industry? And it's kind of complicated. Well, why don't you just answer that first? In other words, how do you get people to, because if Aman is posting stuff on, I don't care, JobsDB, whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me. It's going to be confusing for people if they then go to Paathz. But if it's just there, which is what I would suggest should happen anyway, just naturally, but how do you get that to be affected?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think that it starts from embedding with the education process as well, building sort of the talent supply system from three ways, right? You work with the institutes, you help them with placements, because at the end of the day, the most important thing for a university is where do their students end up after graduating?
Yeah.
Right? And giving them the most amount of ability to showcase their talent away from just a CV, right? So that's the selling point for talent. You have the ability to showcase things that you won't traditionally get to showcase on the job board. Like you have, for example, Opera is an Oracle software that's quite common to use for hospitality, right? It's the property management system. You have that level, you have that training. But if you just put skill Opera, no one's going to understand at what level you're at. But because you've worked in a certain property for a certain amount of period, the level of your skill gets adjusted with it. And the whole point of bringing these people off these other job platforms is the simplicity of these job platforms. A lot of the times these job boards are, you click the LinkedIn Easy Apply, or you go to another LinkedIn application and it sends you back to Marriott's website where you have to make another account and redo the application process.
Can I just say that this Easy Apply thing, at least from the people to whom I've spoken, is not easy at all. Sorry. They should change that to like insanely difficult apply. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. There's so much friction in it. And I think removing that friction in the application process is what our main goal was. You can build a profile with us in less than 6 minutes by uploading your CV, your cover letter, 3 questions on video questions, and that's it. You just kind of, like everything else, you obviously double check what gets across, right? But you have this ability to build a profile, and the application process is you make one account, and from that one account, our job is to make sure that there's enough jobs for you on that.
Yeah. So before I get to sort of the technical aspects of this, if you don't mind, and talk about where artificial intelligence fits into the value chain here, the last piece of the puzzle is, as you said, getting these educational institutions, right, that have been around for the longest time. In other words, you go to Switzerland and you see these hospitality universities, they've been there for a century or more.
Yep.
And they have existing relationships. So what is it like when you go to them and you say, here's a new thing and a better, more efficient way to get your graduates the best jobs that they want and that are most appropriate for them because there are more signals and less noise on this platform? Like, what is the, you know what I mean? Like, what's the big selling point for them where they go, actually, that makes sense to us. We wish somebody had built this 15 years ago.
Absolutely. This is actually the first thing we did when we came up with the idea. We went to these institutes and said, listen, we're building this. Like I went to one of the institutes in Switzerland and I graduated from there, and we're basically used them to help build our taxonomy system. They validated our product from every stage. And that's exactly what we needed, right? These inputs. Like we partnered with EHL just turned 100 years old.
Yeah, I was just checking EHL. That's why I mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just there at their 100-year anniversary, and
Congratulations.
it was something brilliant. I mean, no other institute can have that sort of pull into this world without having established credibility. And you use that credibility and you work with them to develop something that works for the industry. Because we get to hear it from every level, from a student graduating to an alumni who is trying to find a job, mid-career, to a general manager who's from the school, who's looking at candidates, or an HR professional. And all these internal feedback loops give us the ability to build a product that way too.
I was going to say, when you go to Switzerland and you look at EHL, it's different than like the HRTA school at, let's say, the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, or the HRTA school at Cornell, which is also a very famous school in the hotel, restaurant, travel administration industry. How do you balance those differences, and how does the platform have to change, where you're just not focused on what's going on in the US and more focused on what's happening in Europe and Asia?
Absolutely. Right now, we're not taking a look into the US just because we realize that the adoption, as even from our side, adoption in Asia has been an extreme level, right?
Oh, wow.
We've seen it. We are Singapore based, so it is a benefit. But one of the main things is like the US is one big homogeneous market, right?
Mostly.
English market, build one, scale nationally. That's the typical startup play there. Southeast Asia is the opposite. It's like a dozen markets, many languages, different regulations, different payment rails. But if you have that ability to navigate that early on, then expanding to those easier or English-speaking sort of metrics is much easier. I mean, the candidates I care about don't live in the email, right? They assume on their phones. So WhatsApp, production architecture, that is the typical candidate that uses our website now. And so we've adjusted a lot of the platform to frontline level as well. So taken the skill-based inputs from top institutes, but applied the ease of technology to the actual ones using it.
Where are the biggest gaps you see in the hospitality space? In other words, if I'm somebody that's graduating from an institute, or let's say I graduated just from like a really great university, but I want to join the hospitality business, where is the biggest gap of people that need to get hired, but there are not enough people actually that are being found to do those jobs that are desirable? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's operations, right? It's fully operations. The turnover is ridiculous in this space. I mean, it's one of the highest turnovers industries in the world, right? F&B in a hotel even can go up to 70 to 80% turnover a year.
Really?
Yeah. Luxury hospitality peaks out at 27 to 30%, which is still insane. But receptionists, you can see a turnover. You can see an entire team change in 8 months. And for me, that's the thing, right? How do you facilitate? And the way that it currently is you work with an agency, you pay a 3-month, 2-month to replace a frontline staff.
Right.
So the cost is coming out. And then obviously, because there's so much cost into acquiring talent, it's salaries that could actually be paid from that cost. So the gap now is the reality between the job role and what you're actually able to get out of it, and the clarity of the role itself.
Are we suggesting as well that in the hospitality industry that it's sort of the same as the finance industry, where in which, like, it's more expensive to lose somebody than it is to actually hire somebody? Do you know what I mean? In the sense that, like, they come in, they work for 8 months, and then just if you lose them after that, it's just so expensive to replace them because you lose also the work that they were doing as well.
Absolutely. Like, one less person is probably 10 tables being served less in an hour, right?
Yeah,
so that
fair enough.
And so you see the real operational blunt of that.
Where does artificial intelligence come into play here? Like, across the entire stack of stuff that you're building, where does it add the most value, do you think? And how does it manifest itself, not just for the applicants themselves, but maybe you can just run me through how the process works and how it looks different to the hospitality business itself?
Absolutely.
Functionally, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the opportunity that we notice is removing the tedious work in the HR process or the recruitment process, not automating the judgment, right? And this is kind of a little bit of like the play on, I'll give it to you in our own stack. So when a candidate signs up, we take their CV, the video answers, and their credentials, and we turn it all into that structured skill-based profile I mentioned.
Right. Yep.
And there's a real engineering discipline around that. So the parsing runs on queues, the critical to sign up, bounded and observable. And there's an agentic pipeline doing human work, right? That's, in hand, that usually takes 20 minutes to process an individual applicant, right?
20.
Yeah. An individual HR person on one profile will take 20 to 30 minutes to profile, right? And if something gets slightly wrong, it's trivially corrected. But when you have a human in the loop with giving all the information that's out there, right? At a click, you have access to their work history, their video cover letters, how well they fit into the role, why they fit into the role. And then that's kind of our side. And that's our ability to kind of transfer what the person looks like without having to even download the CV.
Can I ask you this? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
So I'm very focused on obviously the presentation that I give when I do a video, when I do audio. You can hear it in my voice. This microphone is really good and my background is manufactured. Do you know what I mean? We spend a lot of time as a business just making sure that the presentation that we have is good.
Yeah.
And it's highly differentiated, right? So I always say like, look, I sound great like this, right? I do. I sound good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I sound terrible like this, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be super hard to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're doing video cover letters, and if we're doing, obviously, if it's video, you have audio as well. What kind of policies do you have for sort of leveling the playing field so that everybody's audio and video actually looks the same? Or are we leaving it up to the applicants to say, I need to buy a better microphone, I need to get a better camera, I need to have a better background so that when I do my video cover letter, I look better than everybody else and more highly differentiated?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, in our industry, first impressions matter the most.
Completely. Right? Since like, particularly if you're a reception person, like that's the first thing you see when you come into the hotel, except the front door. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. Right. And that's the first interaction you have, even with the doorman, right? The first interaction you have with the doorman can actually transfer your entire stay, right? And so we want them to have the ability to choose how they present themselves. We don't want to give them a set criteria. We give them a question set, but it's up to them, because if they don't do it at home, if they don't do it in their own standard, then they're not doing it at work as well, right?
Got it.
And that's kind of just, the nail on that sort of part.
Can I ask you this? In how many cities are you operating right now?
So right now we've just started in Indonesia. We're pushing Philippines and Thailand in the next few weeks as well. And we're also working in Spain, Switzerland at the same time.
Have you considered, again, just getting back to this previous question, have you considered setting up like small studios at a cost to your applicants to say, you can do it at home if you want to, but if you want to differentiate, come into a Paathz studio where there's a good microphone, a decent camera, and spend the 20 minutes there doing your thing, you know, and charge them just like a nominal 50 bucks, whatever it is, to cover costs or make a little bit of money, and have that be part of the service that you offer them, again, so they can be differentiated. It's no different to me. You know, when I graduated from college, I couldn't afford to buy myself a suit.
Yeah.
But I needed a suit. So
Absolutely.
I had to find some way to get that money to go down to Barney's in New York and buy a suit.
No, absolutely. And that's
I mean?
that's a great read. So I think one of the things we're planning on doing is like hosting our own sort of like these career fairs. So we go in person and we get them to set up the profile there, and we guide them on the process, right? And I think that's the best way to do it. So they understand what they need and how they can best present themselves, and we just help them. At the end of the day, this is everything we're giving them is giving the company a pre-context to the interview process. How they do in the interview is completely up to them, but we give them the guiding principles that we got taught at university, how to present yourself. Like if you went to uni and your shirt wasn't properly ironed, you had 15 minutes to run back to your room and you had to go back. The suit and tie every day on campus for us in hospitality school.
Right, so, sure, and put on a belt. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. You know, if you're, your beard's not trimmed up properly, then you're back into the room, and an absence is an absence. But we just give them the guidelines, right? At the end of the day, that's the best bet, and it's a great idea to set up these sort of things. And I think that's something that we're looking towards to do in the future. Just partnering into these institutes, going to these career fairs, because the turnover is in the frontline staff, and that's not the people that are coming out of these institutes.
Yeah, exactly. So one more thing, and then I'll let you go. What sort of data are you expecting to sort of capture and aggregate over time that then you can share with your applicants and frankly with the job providers as well, so they can understand better why there have been mismatches or just whatever that data sort of can provide you from an intelligence standpoint, and then feed that back into your AI system so all decisions get made in a way that's better?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of ways that we're planning to process this data. So the,
Yep.
the platform is just sort of our gateway to collecting it, aggregating it, anonymizing it, and then processing it, so we can predict how the workforce or the labor force purely for hospitality is, right? You understand the salary ranges, you understand how well your hiring score is, so that counts as your global turnover, in comp set turnover, in individual turnover. And then for the individual, it could even be, okay, you've gone to this, you've got this in your career. Based on everyone who signed up, these are the skills I notice that the person in the next role above you has. What are the skill gaps you need to close?
Exactly.
Get to that level.
Yeah.
And then perhaps, with the institutes that we're working with, you can do this course and it gets attached to your profile. It's something that follows you throughout your entire career.
Right. And this is something that hospitality specific sort of job boards can't do, just because there's no way they can effectively understand every vertical industry in the same way that you can. Okay.
Absolutely. And our main thing is like, okay, hospitality is like, this industry has a 40 million worker shortfall, right? And so by 2030, that's the expected 40 million worker shortfall. And how do you fill that? You get untrained workers from other industries, and that's going to happen. We're going to see retrenchments across the board over the next few years.
Yeah.
So if there's an inability to translate a hospitality profile, how are we going to translate someone coming from an external career and fit them into a role in hospitality? So we built this system first, and then bring those people in and understand, okay, how does someone from a previous sales role at a SaaS company fit into a sales company within hospitality?
Exactly.
And that's kind of what we're pushing towards over the next few years.
Awesome. Okay, Ayush, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Really great to have you on the show.
My pleasure. Have a good one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye for now. Okay, Martin, let's bring Jennifer in. Jennifer, can you hear me okay? How are you doing today? It's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Ayush was very interesting. It's great to have you here as well. There's a lot to talk to you about. We wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about how agentic content operations will help brands work faster, understand customers better, and scale without creating more complexity. Maybe you can tell us before we jump into detail about Muse AI.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Thank you, Michael, for having me on again. It's wonderful to be back here after Super AI. A little bit on Muse AI. We are, an AI company focusing on bringing agentic transformation to consumer-facing brands, especially in the areas of content, everything around content, whether it be generation, creation, or ideation and deployment. That's been our bread and butter for over 10 years.
So what type, maybe you can run me through those 3 or 4 things that you just mentioned. Like where are content operations particularly well suited to agentic AI as well? Do you know what I mean? Like where's all this stuff fitting in, and how has that changed in the last 6 to 9 months? If you said you've been operating this for like 7 to 10 years, stuff has changed a lot in the last year, no?
A lot. Yeah, for sure. I think content is, is that piece of marketing that every brand does. You can look at content in the form of copywriting. You can look at content in the form of banner ads, right? So for us, we are, particularly versed in the CPG category, that's consumer product goods, as well as automotive. I think these industries are known for running a lot of visually engaging content on the internet.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Yeah, and that's that need has never changed, but the volume with or without AI has significantly increased, just because there are more channels, right? And people are just in general consuming a lot more. So how do you actually capture that attention? it's not just a volume problem, even though people like to tackle it from a volume perspective. But how, at least the way we see it is, agentic transformation is to, strategically allow these brands to shift their goal to the left, or just upwards a little bit. So you're not always focusing on production efficiency, but at the same time trying to understand more about the psychology behind consumers and creating the right content.
Yeah, so in the old days, which is not that long ago, right? You would create content for television, for billboards, for magazines. Maybe this is a while ago, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that difficult to sort of take something that you'd put on a billboard and put it into a magazine. Maybe you'd change the aspect ratio and stuff like that. And even on television, you had a 30-second ad or a 15-second ad. But now the spaces where your potential clients are operating are so, it's weird. Like, it's so fragmented, right? It's weird to me, and again, tell me where I'm wrong here. Facebook, which I don't participate in at all, still does 135 to 140 more, like $200 billion of ad business every year. But then there's TikTok, and then there's Amazon also does ads. And like, people don't think of Amazon as an ad platform, but that's also a $64 billion a year platform. How do you get brands? They've changed their mindset a little bit, but like, to operate on TikTok, which is non-traditional, and operate on Amazon, which is way more traditional, and still have effective content creation there in a way that makes sense, but that's also differentiated.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? I think you mentioned Facebook. It's funny. I personally have not logged into my Facebook account in a while, and that's generally what I hear from
Same here. But I checked their revenues, and most of their revenues from ads, and their revenue just like 2 years ago, I think it was 2023, it was $135 billion, and last year was $225 billion. Like, it's insane.
Exactly. No advertiser will abandon that channel. Like, it is still somehow a highly effective channel. Meta, Google PMax, and like you said, TikTok, Amazon in the States, right? As brands, I think the usual take is we have to be everywhere. None of this is an option. So what I think, right? The question that you asked, how do I get these brands to, advertise across all of these channels, yet still create content that's relevant to the brand?
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is brands don't really think much into whether or not the content they're creating is relevant. They just want to be everywhere. And that's why, that's why we get to be in business and help brands create the relevant content.
But that's my point, right? They still have to approve the stuff that you're doing. And as soon as you start telling Procter & Gamble, which is like the biggest consumer products business in the world, at least one of the top three, that spends about $10 to $12 billion a year on marketing and advertising.
Yeah.
Somebody inside, and I'm just using them again as a proxy for other big consumer-facing businesses, but somebody inside of there has to have the expertise to understand this is going to work on TikTok, but it's not going to work on Amazon, kind of thing, because they're two completely different platforms. And then you have to convince them to use agentic AI as well. What is going on between a company like yours that's deploying artificial intelligence at the frontier with some of these big brands that are just like, are we ready for that kind of thing, right? And again, taking into account this idea that they definitely want to have volume, but they want their ad spend to be effective as well. They want some kind of ROI, right?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think essentially what you're saying is like, how is agentic AI and content, where are these things going, right?
Yeah.
For me,
and how do you get them there?
let me tell you when I actually get there.
Yeah, exactly. Call me back. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I think the shift, right, from how it used to be 2 years ago is AI was seen as this tool that people operate,
right?
And now we are looking at AI as a layer the business runs on. So a couple of years ago, the question was, which model, which use case, like you mentioned, which frontier model, or which channel. But now it's becoming which parts of my operating model are still human by default and why.
Right. So can you run through that a little bit? Because I was going to ask you that too. How do you decide in an organization that large whether you want to have humans doing this work of creative or agents building copy for you, whether it's visual copy or written copy? And then I know it's a hard question, or just some kind of hybrid where a human looks at it and goes, no one's going to use that or no one's going to like that. So it actually has to be iterated this way. Like, this is getting very complicated in a way, no?
It is getting very complicated.
I'm making you tired, right?
I mean, it's a question that I deal with every day. So I think I've been pressure test to, take questions like this.
But again, I don't mean to I'm super curious, right? Because again, we do marketing, right? And we also employ artificial intelligence to do a whole bunch of things that we work on. And I'm curious what it looks like from a much larger sort of consumer-facing brand perspective.
Right. And honestly, the actual bottleneck has never been technology. It's always a human.
Yeah, for sure. For everything, right?
Yeah. So a lot of times what we see is that most enterprises can't absorb the technology, can't absorb as fast as the technology moves.
Right.
So, it honestly, the way we see it is that in the upcoming months or years, it's less about capability and more about convergence, helping organizations decide what to do first, when it almost seems like they could do just about everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So again, when we first started having sort of automated marketing or automated advertisements, right? You would have what, demand side platforms? Do I have this right? DSPs?
Yes.
Wow, what a great memory. I haven't spoken about this in a while. But you have these DSPs and then the content that gets provided to it on an automated basis. But we're way past that now, right? Things are getting like way more complicated. How do you build an agent or work with someone to build an agent and make sure that it really understands what that brand message is meant to be on a consistent basis? Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Okay, we always have to break down such complex problems
please.
in parts, right? And it is a data-driven, it is a human-driven decision, but because everything that we produce is going to, be presented to the entire world. So understand what consumers want. That owning that bit of data still is what we think one of the more important aspect. So the way we do it, right? It's always about allowing. I think last time I mentioned we have this thing called a subjective world model.
Yep.
And subjective world model is there to simulate consumer behaviors in order for brands to have better insights. And we actually use that in order to help brands understand not just how to create content, but what types of content are actually appropriate or could potentially be effective. In the old days, we leave the validation part to the last bit. It's like you go through, your marketing communication strategy, and then you go through creative direction, production, then you run the ads, and then you validate it. That is your DSP time.
Yeah.
Now with AI, the crucial change is that we can actually validate it before anything is even run. And that's the key, right? So we put validation at the very beginning, and then we use validation to decide how we should create our communication strategy, then do the creative, then move into production.
Interesting. And why does it have to be flipped around? And how does AI help you actually do the validation in a way that wasn't possible before?
Okay, it has to be flipped around, because if you look at some of these big brands that you mentioned, they're not short on brand awareness, right? There is never, like you say, Procter & Gamble, everybody knows Procter & Gamble and all the brands that they own. Same goes for some of these very large cosmetic beauty brands.
Sure.
But there is always that pinch in the middle where awareness actually doesn't get translated into purchasing consideration, right? And that middle is where your planners, your marketers, your I don't know designers, they are doing things without much understanding, without much data validation. So they're blind testing creative. Every decision is made by hand, and so you can't expect that kind of workflow to actually be effective. So to us, that's basically our, when we first started building, that's our assumption, is to shift left, to shift validation to the beginning, so that the middle part isn't a black box.
Yeah. And there's less guesswork involved. I mean, there's more guesswork, I guess, at the beginning, but if it's validated at some point, then you can be much bigger or just scale it bigger. One of the things that I find actually really interesting, and this has nothing to do with you per se, but like you said that everybody knows Procter & Gamble and their brands. I would say that everybody's heard of P&G and everybody's heard of Tide or Pampers, but I wouldn't say that everybody knows that P&G makes Tide or Pampers. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's so fascinating to me that like I know Procter & Gamble off the top of my head, but I literally had to look it up on the internet to see what their products were because I simply did not know. How do you measure now whether an agentic content system is actually better for the ROI rather than what you said before, is like just creating volume? And do they care?
That's a very interesting question. Do they care? Right?
Yeah.
And also better ROI. I think ROI is measured differently for a large company like that. So every department has their own ROI. Do they care? Ultimately, yes, they I think they do care. They should care.
Sure. Go ahead.
But I actually want to, go back to, how do we know that it's effective? Like the guesswork in the beginning, right? It's the whole point of introducing AI is also to introduce it in a way so that there is less guesswork. And just a little bit on how we make sure that there's less guesswork. We never skip the portion where we believe that brands need to get closer to their consumer. So we have to, you have to design it, do it in a way, that's why consumer market insights is becoming a very big department in a lot of these enterprises, so that you try to do your interviews, your market research, all of those things to be able to get closer to your consumer so that there's less guesswork. The way we do that is by allowing allowing the brands to create digital clones of their target audience, their target persona, right? So it becomes a 24/7 consumer insight agent that never stops understanding the world through the consumer's lens.
So,
And yeah,
sorry. This is fascinating to me, but are you suggesting then that the product companies can create a digital representation of a specific consumer cohort and then have that part of their process on the agentic AI side watch the content or look at the content that they're creating and give feedback in a way that allows them to understand whether or not, before they release all this stuff to the public, whether or not that's going to be effective?
yes. And it's amazing how you got that in the very muddy sentences that I put together.
I can be smart sometimes. It's weird.
Oh, you're smart all the time.
That's funny. But that's actually really interesting. And I presume that at some point you have to, not have to, but you would want to sort of tweak that avatar or that cohort as those sort of brand tastes change. And, you know, if you're sitting in, and again, for regular consumers, if you're sitting in, let's say, the like 18 to 25 or 24 cohort, at some point, particularly if you're at the top of that band, you're moving then into the sort of 25 to 40 cohort. And what's coming after you generationally is different. So you're going to have to continuously change like what that looks like from a monitoring perspective, no?
Yes, you do. And so you bring up a good point. You do need to do that, but based on the conventional method of market research that
Right.
some of these, the companies that we all know that are very good at market research do, you cannot reach that, right? Because as human beings, we are constantly evolving. So the conventional method is when I conduct a focus group, I bring in, I don't know, 20 people into
Yeah.
the room. I ask them questions. I get all of my answers, but they leave the room, right? What happens when they leave the room? They change. They have a burger, they get sleepy, and then they change their mind on everything that they said. But as a brand, I don't get to capture that. The
Right.
fact that human beings are ever evolving. So I like to go back to, I'm American, so I from New York, and
Oh no,
I
the best kind
I
of
love
American.
I love the show Sleep No More. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that play, but the Sleep No More play was built on, well, Shakespeare's Hamlet, but it was an interactive theater where the way that experience is designed is to basically allow audience to understand that just because something is not happening right in front of you doesn't mean that other storylines are not happening simultaneously, right? So think about that abstractly.
Go ahead.
So you are walking around the theater, and then it's a 5-story theater, so you are running into different bits and pieces of the plots, and those plots don't stop because of you.
I mean,
So-
this is something, sorry, conceptually, it's really hard for people to understand. Just
Yeah.
because it's off screen doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just because a consumer has tell you what they think about your answer doesn't mean that that answer will not change after they leave the room, because as human, we're always changing. It's the same as why Van Gogh, when he was painting his sunflowers, he had to paint at the same time every day, just so the light hits the flower, the object, the same way.
Otherwise, it's going to look different.
Right. So if you do your market research the conventional way, you will never be able to capture that, because your market research is 2 months long. And then what happens in the 9th month, right?
Yeah.
Everything is different already. Your insights are no longer relevant. So building an AI panel allows you to keep this on and also fine tune them as you go, so that your research, your I guess your approach to understanding market never stops.
Yeah, so I'm not ignoring you. I'm just thinking about like what that would mean from a workflow perspective, and I'm curious like how it's changed what you do at Muse as well from what you used to do, right? Because you have all these new tools that are available to test things, and yet it still feels like a little bit risky because, look, there's human risk as well. You're right. In a one-person universe where you say, like, do you like these Pampers? Again, just using them as a proxy, right?
Yeah.
You're right. Before they're hungry, or maybe their baby was tired. Like, you don't know what's going on in their lives when they give you the answer. But now you're producing that at scale, because now you're inputting that into an artificial intelligence agent and then creating 1,000 of them. And it's hard to replicate like how a human feels and changes over time, if that makes sense, because the AI agent doesn't get hungry and it doesn't get tired and they don't have babies. And you know what I mean? So how do you simulate all of that stuff inside of your workflow when you're trying to understand like what the impact of a certain campaign or a certain story is going to be? And the answer may be like, I don't know, because it seems valid to me, but it's almost like it's helping in such a gigantic way, but also complicating things for you in some senses, no?
I agree. It definitely becomes more complicated in terms of workflow if you have this, like, partially AI, partially human loop. So an end-to-end operation will look something like this.
Go ahead.
You build the AI persona, you build your interview, sort of your survey, right? And then you have your AI personas to respond to this survey. And I'm not saying that it's always going to be 100% representational of what market wants. So AI survey isn't here to replace conventional survey. You almost need to send, for every 500 AI interviews you conduct, you should try to send out, 300 to real humans just to validate.
It's so funny you say that, because if you look at the note that I just wrote down, it says AI persona, human persona, and I was going to ask you about hybrid, because that's what it seems like to me you have to do to get like the real human thing, but then also get scale. Right? Because I can do 1,000 AI interviews, but maybe I can only do 200 human ones. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So these AI personas, they shouldn't be created from scratch, because they have to represent some aspect of truth in this world.
Right.
So you look at that. That's why we call them, digital clones. So maybe you have done real interviews in the past, but you want to continue the conversation digitally. So that's where your digital clones are created. But let's say your consumer insight actually gets to scale, then you will also need your next step in the loop to be able to accommodate this kind of scale. So the next part will be, how do we use a different agent? Here we call it the ideation agent, to be able to take consumer insights and to do mass trend scouting on social media, to understand, this is what humans want. This is what this is what these AI personas think of my brand, and this is the marketing strategy that it communicates. But how do I land this as an actual, plan, a marketing plan? I should validate that with what's actually working on the internet.
Yeah.
So we do that as well, almost like a social listening type of exercise, where you look at the trending topics, you see how these trending topics are shaping across different social networks, and you find your largest funnel, right? Your largest funnel are all the trending signals. You have to then cross-reference that with what's actually working for your brand. So what you can use become a little bit smaller. Then you have to then look at them against your brand guidelines, what you can do, cannot do. So that funnel becomes distilled to the very, very bottom, where there should only be like, I don't know, like 8 strategies that you can then go on testing. Then it's the execution part, right? Execution is in the form of TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. You can no longer produce this content manually. It doesn't.
No, it's not possible. And I presume, like, once you start using artificial intelligence, there's no going back, right? Because there's no way to create the scale. There's also no way to do all the social listening you were just talking about. I'm curious what it's done to, like, the nature of your own business in the sense that you have to use a lot more technology. You have to understand a lot more data. You have to employ a lot more artificial intelligence yourself just to be able to understand how all this stuff works. How have you found this from a cost perspective? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're using LLMs to do any of this stuff, do you start defaulting for most of the tasks to sort of open weight and open source models? Or are you still paying, and none of my business, but you understand the point, like still paying Anthropic or still paying OpenAI to use this stuff? And do those costs get passed on to your clients? Because at some point, that can get very complex, but also very expensive. I'm curious how it's changed the nature of your work and your cost basis and your data organization and all that stuff too.
Right. I think a couple of days ago, you guys sent out a newsletter, right? In order for IT projects to work these days, 3 groups of people have to align. So IT needs to see the risk.
Yep. Finance needs to see the cost.
Finance needs to see the spend, and the leadership needs to see the value, right?
I'm with you. I remember doing it. Yeah, go ahead.
You remember? You know.
I do completely. I could have told you the 3 cohorts. Anyway, go ahead.
Right. So I think what you guys were saying is that if any leg is missing, then it doesn't work. But for me, I would actually take it one step further. That like the reason so many AI programs stall is that those 3 legs are measured on 3 different clocks. And I understand I'm going off.
No, definitely go ahead. This is really interesting to me because this is a real person with a real business that's running this real stuff. And I'm curious, like, how those 3 kind of things, they're definitely not in parallel in the same timeline. So I'm curious how you see it.
Right. Because finances sees the spend immediately. It's a line item, right? IT sees the risk but value shows up last and shows up a lot of time most fuzzy. So often, when you have like, a quarter or 2 later and tangled up with everything else in the business was doing, you're no longer just missing a leg, right? Your 2 legs are low bearing on day 1, and the 3rd arrives way too late.
Yeah.
So that asymmetry is what kills pilots in many projects. That's
interesting. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. So it's not the lack of belief, but that the costs and risks are concrete and present, while the value is abstract and deferred. That's the problem that we see. So for us, the job isn't to prove value eventually.
For sure.
It's to make value legible as early as spend and risk are.
And is that different? Is that different than the business was before? Yeah, because you're running against 3 different. You have to define it or explain it to 3 different groups of people inside of a company that you're not managing, right? So if it's internal just to Muse, that's much easier to do. But if it's external, which it always is, because that's where your clients are, it's hard to talk to the finance team, to the creative team, and then to the leadership team to get them all aligned. Like, that doesn't seem to be your job per se.
Well, that doesn't seem to be, but I think what I've personally become almost obsessed with is front loading the proof, so running the validation before the build.
Yeah.
It is very important because it is very expensive. We do it like, okay, going back to your question, are we still using Anthropic? Are we still using ByteDance? Yeah, we have to use all of them. But to be able to, do what we do and we basically have created a operating system for agents so that they're able to communicate with each other. It also means that we own the compute. We can route the task to the most appropriate through the most appropriate agent in order for the most appropriate frontier model to execute the job.
So you're running an orchestration layer as well. That's pretty complex, yeah?
So we call that our creative reasoning model. That is the orchestration layer. And I think that's where every company should start. Well, not start, but should look at immediately, is if you're just using Anthropic directly, or you're using Gemini or Image 2.0, you're always going to be, your cost is going to linearly scale with the work that you do. There is never a way for you to Um,
Right? There's no economy of scale here, right? It's not like you use more
right,
tokens,
no,
get a
yeah,
discount. It doesn't work that way.
no, it's a positive correlation.
Completely one-to-one, maybe? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So you when companies are looking at AI or using AI that way, the cost will eventually outweigh all the pros of AI. So our clients like to come to us and say, AI, we should be able to what is it? Cut costs and boost efficiency. That's where most brands think about it, and I'm like, no, you're not gonna be able to do that. At least you're not gonna be able to do that with the way you're currently using AI.
Right. So that's the other thing too, is like I have so many questions written down. Is there an encouragement from you? Right. I love this idea of front loading the proof, but when you front load the proof to them, do you also tell them that they're going to have to change their workflow as well? Right. Because otherwise they're not working in the same cadence that you're working. Right. Because the whole development and creative process has changed because of the onset of artificial intelligence and what it enables you to do. Do they have to change their workflows as well?
Yeah. And I think this is where it gets uncomfortable for a lot of enterprises.
Go ahead.
Right? It's that this makes AI adoption an organization and governance design problem. It's not a technology problem.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so you have to decide in advance what value looks like and how you'll see it before anyone's impressed by a demo. When you don't do that work, and most organizations don't do that work.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why, the finance and the IT quietly, the thing leadership got excited about.
How do you help them manage this governance and design problem? Right? Because again, you will have done it more often than they've done, or more times or more often than any one institution has done it. At some level, fortunately for you, you should understand like what that governance should look like. Every company is going to be different for sure, and the size of the company matters. But there have to be some sort of basic sort of tenets that apply to all of them. How important is that for you to communicate to them as well from a governance standpoint?
I think to simplify your question slightly, they do have to change the way we work, right? And we need to distill the problem. Like the thing about agentic is that clients and us, it all of a sudden in a very short amount of time, it feels like everything is possible. So it becomes hard for brands to decide what phase one would look like.
Right.
Because choosing this phase one problem to solve means they are not solving the other 10 that they could potentially solve.
Right.
So for us, it's always that intent. We come in, and this is not a out of box SaaS solution that you can just
No. This is not a plug and play thing. It's got to be customizable for every client, and it may be customizable for every vertical inside that client. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you look at it, you do very thorough interviews and try to understand, what it is that they're trying to solve, how it is that they're currently going about it, and then build that solution. So there's that diagnostic layer, which we always do. Then the solution mapping stage, because we have done over 400 use cases.
Wow.
And in all the different verticals, right? So, and I can say that it's the same, yet it's very different. The same content problem at P&G and Unilever are surprisingly different.
Will have to be, because even their product design is different. Like this is the thing that I think is hard for people to understand, right? Everything that they do is nuanced different, which means that everything that you do with them has to be different as well.
Yeah. So going back, diagnostic, solution mapping, then actually delivering that solution, whether it be co-piloting with the client or building up their wiki LLM, so that all of that data, fed into the agentic knowledge base.
Right.
Then the last piece is fine tune, because going back again, like these AI personas have to be updated. Your agentic workflow has to be fine tuned as well, because it's like we do financial planning on an annual or quarterly basis. It's the same thing. So really distill all of the problems that clients are bringing up, and then boil it down to that one thing. And when we start from that one thing, so it's also less risky, because clients these days, they want to be forward, yet they're very conservative.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? They want to be like 100 miles ahead of where they are, but
Yeah.
they want to drive the same car there. Do you know what I mean? It's weird in a way, no?
Yeah, they asked me just last week. I was I was actually back in Singapore, doing a client, doing a demo, and then they were just saying, "This is great, but does everything have to be automated? Like, can I interfere if I want to?"
Right. Can I stop the train as it's moving at 150 kilometers an hour or whatever?
Stand in front of it,
Yeah.
I was like, yes, you totally can. And, if you let me know, like, and that question in itself is very interesting. It's like, why do you want to stop it? Why do you want to interfere? Which part of this workflow that I have built out for you
Makes
is
you uncomfortable.
alarming, is uncomfortable, for you, that you want to step in. And so in that case, there are two ways we can go about it. Is one, let's address your concern and fine tune it so that it works according to your needs. Two, acknowledge the fact that this is where brand brings in their personality.
Right.
You always have to have a human layer. And so put that guardrail.
Interesting. Okay. Look, Jennifer, I've taken up way too much of your time today. And where are you now? You're not in Singapore?
No, I am not in Singapore as of now. I was there just last week, and then I was in Shanghai, and today I'm in Taipei.
Okay, I won't tell anybody. Nobody will know. I'll tell everybody you're in Singapore. Anyway, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking so much time with us today. I went way over time, but I couldn't stop asking things, so hopefully that's okay with you. You were an amazing guest. Really amazing.
Thank you for having me again.
It was great to have you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye for now. Okay, Martin, let's bring in Rachiket Arya, the head of AI at Aspire. Hello. How are you doing today? I am doing super duper. Did I properly pronounce your first name? I tried really hard. Rachiket? Super. Martin, you want to change the lower third? There you go. Okay, man. It's great to have you here, and thank you again. I know how busy you guys are. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. We wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about how AI native financial infrastructure can help businesses operate with more intelligence, more flexibility, and more control. And maybe, again, just reintroduce Aspire to our viewers and listeners, just really quickly if you can.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here. Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for having me here. So Aspire is basically this finance stack for global businesses. And essentially, we offer business accounts to small and medium businesses, startups that want to go global from day one, offers cards, credit cards, corporate card, etc., for all the banking needs.
Okay. So one of the things that you guys did was you did this anonymized study, right?
Right. Yes.
Do you want to talk about this at all? Just tell us, like, what does this anonymized transaction data reveal about AI adoption that maybe people aren't 100% or fully understanding, if that's okay?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Happy to share a little bit about this study that we did.
Super.
So we took basically 10,000 businesses that have their accounts on Aspire for over the last couple of years. Mostly the data is from Singapore. And it's very interesting that some of the results reveal some preference towards specific AI platforms. So the best piece that came out for me, and because I'm such a Claude and Anthropic supporter.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Anthropic. So ChatGPT or OpenAI to Anthropic expenditure in 2025 the ratio was about 4.2, whereas in 2026 that ratio has gone down to 1.5.
Which means that it was 4 times more people using OpenAI from a payment standpoint and a
4
token
times
standpoint.
as much expenditure.
That's what I mean, as expenditure on OpenAI than there was on, and now it's what do you say,
1.5.
So it's collapsing actually to almost even.
It is. And
close.
Yes, in fact, the expenditure now, it's very, very close. With just Anthropic growing by about 258% in terms of the customer base.
Right.
17x increase in spending.
So do you get a sense from your surveys like what's driving this? And let me just give you an example internally for our gigantic business. We basically split our usage between Anthropic and OpenAI.
All right.
Okay, but to be fair, the things that we do with it are completely different, right? So Martin will use OpenAI. I mean, to use Anthropic to do a bunch of things that are like very sort of programming related, technical related. And I use ChatGPT 5. Whatever it is, mostly on the content side. And I'm curious, like, what's driving this and how people respond to it. Is it more like of a religious thing, if you know what I mean? Like, I've already committed myself to Android, and I'm just going to be an Android guy until the day I die. And I don't, even if my mother's on iOS, I'm not doing it, kind of thing. Are we seeing the same sort of bifurcation between Anthropic and OpenAI?
Right. That's a great question. And in fact, this is something that I was sharing with my team internally a while ago. This is just my analysis of why this is happening, what is driving the change, right?
Yep.
So when Claude came out, it was beating ChatGPT in every benchmark there is. And the way it was shipping so much faster than ChatGPT over the last couple of quarters, in fact. But the very strategic moves that Claude did or Anthropic did was it released this protocol called MCP.
Yep.
I'm sure you would have used MCP.
Model Context Protocol for people that don't know.
Exactly. And Claude or Anthropic was the founder of MCP. They are the ones who set MCP up, which is essentially your protocol to connect with other tools. And with AI, increasingly useful only if you have interconnected tools.
Yep.
Claude sort of capitalized on their own tool, which is their own protocol, MCP, to actually offer a lot of value to customers who would then use Claude.
Right.
And then the second strategic aspect of Claude, or how they actually got into non-tech businesses, ops, and product as well, was through skills. So skill was essentially this idea of packaging a very long prompt, but a very, very carefully written prompt together into just one file.
Right.
And allowing non-tech users to be able to just quickly do their work with the help of these skills that Claude provided to them out of the box. And
sorry, go ahead.
So no, I mean, that's my understanding of how Claude really quickly grew in this. I mean, apart from their UI, UX, and developer experience, which is amazing anyway, but that was their moat, in my understanding, to get into non-tech market as well.
I feel like there's a ping pong or sort of a TikTok going on between, and again, you would know this better than I do, between Anthropic and OpenAI, where you're right, Anthropic will release something and then and Dario Amodei will come out and say something, and then Sam Altman is like, hey, we do that too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then Fable 5 comes out, and then 5.6 comes out, and they just keep going back and forth on this. It's like, I really feel like it's a game of ping pong, and they're both trying to like improve their serves and their slams. But what has happened recently, I'm curious, and again, this may be a little bit off topic, but you're so involved in this, with this sort of subscription versus the API-based stuff that Fable 5 and Anthropic seem to be flip-flopping on, where it's like, we're no longer going to include this in your, maybe until the 19th of July, maybe into perpetuity. I don't know. It depends if my cat has a good day. Do you know what I mean? Like, how does this manifest itself in people's understanding of how effective this tool is going to be or how available it's going to be?
Right. So that's a very good question. And to be honest, we've also been playing quite a bit around with Fable to understand, like, to what extent is it useful, to the point where even once they stop offering Fable as a part of the subscription, that we would want to pay for it and use it.
Right.
So interestingly, Fable is not really for everyone. It's like bringing a machine gun to a knife fight, essentially.
So completely agreed. Go ahead. I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Right. And for us, it's very useful in very specific parts of the architecture, only in the engineering domain. It's not as useful in any non-tech or non-engineering domain for us. So like everything that people are doing, they can already do with Opus. as it is.
Right.
And so Fable for us then just means that we need to test it enough by the time 12th or 19th July or whenever they stop offering it, to then realize we need to just put a certain budget to it, because ROI at the end of the day for the company is important. And that's the perspective that we're measuring the effectiveness of Fable against. And similarly for 5.6, we would want to do the same.
Right. So in the real world, which is where you're operating, right? You're not operating in a lab somewhere. How often do people run up against their budgets where they're using Fable to do these sort of high-level engineering tasks that you talked about, but then they have to stop, or they fall back to Opus 4.8 and get lower quality? Do you know what I mean? Like, what does that look like? And how important is it for that to be included in the subscription? Or is the budget big enough? Like, these things it's starting to get really complex.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you want an engineer out there going like, oh no, I can't do this. Now I have to do this manually kind of thing. Or I have to fall back to 4.8 and I don't know what the quality is going to be like. Like, what is that like in the real world?
That's a very interesting question. And maybe let me give you an analogy. Like, the way I like to think about it is that all of these models are essentially people of different ages. And so you have Haiku or Sonnet or Opus or Fable in terms of that they're increasing in terms of the age. So Fable could be like this 17-year-old person that is really smart, but very expensive to hire.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it's really your choice whether you want to spend that much to hire that person, or you're okay with slightly lower quality, but spending lesser on the work that you want to get done.
Right. But again, this is no different from humans as well, right? In other words, when I was at Goldman Sachs, we used to say, if we hire one superstar programmer, which is going to, and I'm making up numbers, which is going to cost, let's say, like $375,000 a year, that could have real impact. Or we could get 3 guys at $125,000 a year and spend the same amount of money, but those 3 guys are going to be marginally less good than the one superstar guy, but I can manage them better, or one of them can be a contractor. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you balance this stuff in the sort of agentic code writing world versus the human world?
Right. So there are actually a lot of parallels to be drawn. Like, if you talked about hiring 3 people over 1 person, there's a lot of management overhead, and there's a lot of context overhead that builds up that you need to provide to these humans.
Absolutely.
And interestingly, it's very similar with the agents as well.
Yeah.
But yes. In practice, you could get Fable to solve a lot of problems. The only difference between humans and agents, in the case of at least for software engineering, is that you still need to provide a lot of context and guardrails to even a very, very smart model, and that it will still not pick up on nuances that a human would, because the human is proactive about researching on stuff.
Right.
And so that difference still exists. And in terms of then, yes.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
So I was just circling back to, in terms of spending on Fable then, for us, it is going to still be a very exceptional spend to actually let developers get Fable to do their job. And we want to have a process where people put together a proper business case before we allow spending on Fable, because we don't see this as the silver bullet for almost everything.
Interesting. So when it comes to context, right? Again, just correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never been a developer, but I presume a lot of times there's, developer 1 sitting next to developer 2, and the guy sits next to this lady and he asks her like, hey, I know you solved this problem in another context before. Can you just help me do that? Is there any way to get the agents to be able to have the same conversation, or is it just easier for humans to do today? You know what I mean?
Yes, that is, again, a very good question. And in fact, that is a part of what the industry is offering right now in terms of solutions. So you have these RAG platforms, retrieval augmented generation platforms. You essentially have this context, this memory store of your entire business, your code base, your engineering requirements put together in a database, sort of, that your agents can connect to and talk to. So there are a lot of products out there, but you could also be building this in-house to exactly avoid these kind of conversations. So even right now, junior engineer asking senior engineer, or one team asking another team, can actually be resolved with the help of such products.
So here's another I think it's interesting, actually. One of the big complaints that I used to hear, again, when I was working at Goldman, was you'd have this superstar developer like write some really insanely great, really tight code, and not leave any comments on it, right? Not leave any explanations inside the code, and then get hired by like Morgan Stanley to be like, well, I can kind of see what it does, but I don't know what you were thinking here. When you're using agentic code writing, are they adding the comments in as well when they're writing the code so you understand what they're thinking, or is that something that a human has to do afterwards? And does it matter?
Again, very good point. And where we are at right now, we're pushing to just get only agents to write any code at all.
Really? 100% of the code gets written by agents. This is where you want to get.
Not just, yes, that's exactly where we want to get. Not yet.
I'm not going to hold you to it. Like, I'm not going to come and get you and be like, it's 98%, dude. You said 100. That's not what I want to do. I'm just, directionally, that's interesting to me. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. Like, directionally, that's really our North Star. And in getting there, the idea is for the agent to write code that can be understood by a future agent who's reading through that code and who's trying to write more.
Okay. So, but you wouldn't want the agent to actually write notes in there so that there's no question about what the agent was thinking, or does the agent actually have enough of its own intelligence and context to be able to then write that, or no? You're presuming then that if you give the same context and same information to a new agent that looks at the code. Here's the thing though, the difference from before is that, again, I could quit and go to, to Morgan Stanley, but the agent's not going to quit. He's not going to go home early. His kid doesn't get sick, kind of thing. So how does that work?
So there are a lot of processes, and there are a lot of processes that are built around actually being able to write good code with the help of agents.
Yep.
And that includes the way you structure your repository. There are these files called .md files, claude.md or agents.md, that essentially houses the instructions for what the code is supposed to do.
Got it.
But also individually inside every folder, for example, within the code, you would have instructions that share exactly what this code is supposed to do.
Got it. Okay.
And one of this concept that has recently come up is called harnesses. Includes your tests on how you want to test the code. So even if the agent writes the code, it should also perform these tests to understand what the code is supposed to do in the real world. So it would go and test the product once it writes the code already. I
understand. No pun intended here, but the first word that popped into my mind was aspirational. So no pun intended. Don't make fun of me. But why is it aspirational to have agents writing 100% of the code? Is it just cost, or is it just that it's faster and better at writing the code, and that it's more effective and more efficient for humans to then review the code and make sure it does what it says before it gets, what's the right word? I forget the word for it, before it gets deployed?
Right. At the base of it, it's really efficiency. Because, AI can write code literally faster than humans can type.
For sure.
Right. And that really translates into the top line on how fast a feature can be delivered. For example, and I'll tell you this because I've seen these demos, and I know a few companies that are already doing this, that if a customer is trying to use a platform that a company X has developed, well, Y, let's just use Y. A company Y has developed.
Because there is a company called X. Please stop naming companies silly in a way that's silly. I agree. I'm on your side here.
Right. Okay. So, and I'm using Y, and I come across a bug, some feature that it just doesn't do, and I ask it to, dude, I really need to do this. There are companies that are already doing this, that internally, this gets translated into a request that gets translated into tech specs, code, and is automatically deployed. So just 10 minutes later, I could be using Y again, and the feature that I requested is already present.
Really?
Yes. And it's insane. It's in POC, it's like very early stages, but that would be crazy.
Why do you care whether it's in pure C? Just because it's speaking directly to the machine?
As in, the idea is like there is a level of abstraction you want from a product development standpoint as well.
I understand.
So not every user's feature request needs to be attended to, and not every feature is so easy to implement that it could just take 10 minutes to implement those. So to that end, it's still like in a proof of concept phase, but it would be amazing to get there at some point.
Are we getting close to the point? Sorry, I have so many questions about this. I hope you don't mind, but are we getting close to the point where the agents as well can understand architecturally what needs to get done, as opposed to just writing specific pieces of code that accomplish specific tasks, if that makes sense?
Right. So the very 0.1 percentile of the companies that have been AI agentified and AI-fied or AI-pilled are able to figure out a good part of their architecture with the help of agents already. If I talk about Aspire, we want to get there. We were not there yet. But yes, architectural decisions are more and more, like agents are able to take those decisions more and more accurately as we speak.
How do you coordinate internally? How can I say this the right way? So like there's a product team that wants to build certain products. There's the there's the coding team, whether it's completely agentic or still being managed by humans. But then there's the finance team that also inside of Aspire that just goes, we can't spend the money on that, or we can allocate resources to that. How do those three teams work together, specifically with the AI team, to understand this is what it's going to cost us? And at some level, are they involved in the decision-making of, if you do this on Anthropic or on, let's just say Fable 5 as an example, it's really expensive. But if you use Grok, it's much less expensive. Or if you use DeepSeek, like, do you have all these sort of orchestration choices that you can use as well?
Yeah, so to be honest, that part of the process hasn't changed much over the last couple of years. I mean, yes, the expectation to spend on AI has increased. And as more people become aware of what AI can do, the idea of spending on AI is increased in general. And our report also says that. But at the end of the day, the decisions still have to come from the business. Yeah. And so if there is proven ROI, you would want to spend on it. If there isn't, then that spending goes down. So the fundamentals there haven't changed much.
Got it. Can I ask you one more thing before I let you go?
Sure.
What is the level of excitement? Like if I had and again, tell me where I'm wrong here, but if I had spoken to someone at Aspire a year ago, first of all, would there have been a head of AI? And second of all, what's the level of excitement around implementing artificial intelligence inside the company? And is it still like really high? Do you know what I mean? Or is it more just like, this is now day-to-day stuff. We just keep doing it like we've always been doing it for the last 6 months?
It's been the best there has been in Aspire in the last 1 year. Honestly, awesome. I mean, 1 year ago, no head of AI, yes. Just this year, we had set out for Claude adoption a KPI for having, say, 200 weekly active users. Right. In a quarter. Like that was the goal of enablement in the quarter.
Right.
And within a couple of weeks, people had adopted Claude and were just building things, and the AI governance team was lagging behind and figuring out, okay, how we want to do things for the long term.
Right.
And it's been amazing because everyone started to use workflow automation tools, Claude. People are building web-coded apps that are helping the internal teams, not just the engineering teams, but to be more productive within operations, product, and literally every function of the company right now.
Unbelievable. Okay, look, I have so many questions for you, but I don't want to keep you for longer. You were amazing. Love to have you back. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this out of your busy day. You were incredible. Really, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yep, definitely. Thank you, Michael. Have a good one.
Okay, bye for now. Okay, Martin, let's bring in our last guest for today, Yifan, the founder and CEO at Red Day Technology. How are you doing today? You can hear me okay? Awesome. I can hear you well too. Martin, let's bring him into the main room, yeah? Awesome. Okay. It's great to have you here today. We wanted to have you on to talk about how trusted identity, and this is going to be interesting, I think, interoperable digital infrastructure will enable businesses to use autonomous financial agents. But before we do that in detail, tell us a little bit about the important stuff that Red Day Technology is doing.
Okay, we have been building infrastructure for the digital currency and the digital identity in past 5 years. For example, the stablecoin, regulated stablecoin, tokenized deposit for the bank, and the digital identity is the legal digital identity. So we help the different governments to build their digital identity infrastructure in China and also in some other jurisdictions. And it turns out the digital identity and the digital money actually fits right into the academic, agentic, error. so for agent to automatically to verify themselves to trigger payments, actually digital currency and digital identity are the right thing.
So talk to me about this. One of the most well-known people in the sort of digital currency and digital identity space said to me during Super AI in Singapore in June that digital currencies were not built for humans. They were built for machines. And that this corroborates actually what you were saying, and that the fact that you have digital identity, digital currency now fits in perfectly. Was just sitting there waiting. It's like, okay, I can't talk to humans because they can't handle this. But now that agentic AI is there, and now that I have MCP, and now that a lot of things give me API access, now I can actually use digital currencies in a way that they were meant to be used. Maybe you can run me through how you feel about that statement and maybe expand upon that a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, what we have been building, it was really hard to explain for the first 4 years. And since the second half of last year, people begin to understand, okay, now we understand why you even build those things. Because like you said, those are not built for humans, it's built for the machines. So that's really, I think we spend a lot of time and a lot of investment right now. It's, we luckily run into the right time.
So can you just dig into that a little bit deeper? How does like having on-chain identity or digital identity enable agentic finance? Like just run us through why that's important and how it works and what couldn't be done before and what can be done now.
Okay. First, the legal, especially legal identity for agents is a huge topic right now.
Go ahead.
All the government, because it's about accountability, right? When the AI agent do money laundering, you cannot blame the agent. It's someone behind. It could be a corporation, it could be a natural person. So that's why what we're working on right now in mainland China right now is to link legal identity to agents. Okay, we don't do registration. Okay, we link identity to the agent. So when agent calls, it's anonymous. It's a zero knowledge anonymous. So when they call payment services, the payment services know it's a KYC agent, but they don't know who. Okay, then everything triggered. So which means for this kind of AI can prove themselves, you need to build this kind of zero knowledge identity, digital identity, and the verifiable credential technology linked together to give the agent approve. And then when they call any services through APIs, MCPs, then the receiving, the service provider actually can, in 2 seconds verify it's KYC and it's a legitimate AI agent and calling the services. So they say, okay, I allow you to call. Think about if you don't have digital identity, legal digital identity, how give you identity. For example, you have a physical paper ID, how you give the agent prove themselves to an automatic process.
Right.
So that, and remember, there will be billions of agents
for sure
in one single country. So which means the verification will be huge volume. And that's why there's no way any government can set up a centralized system to get billions of verification requests every single day. So they need to decentralize. So when digital identity deployed on chain, like a DID, right? Yep. Then the verifier, when they receive AI agent call with digital identity attached to the call, then they can just go to a chain to verify. So they don't need to bother a government gateway, everything. So which means this is decentralized infrastructure, enable billions of, KYC checks on the AI agent, request and the calls. So this is literally the only infrastructure can really handle this kind of volume.
So and again, I'm just trying to make an analogous sort of comparison, if you don't mind. It's not a one for one, but just something that people can understand. Let's just presume there are 190 countries in the world.
Yeah.
Every country at some level coordinates like what a passport should look like and what kind of data and information it should have on it. So that when you travel, all of the sort of automated reading machines, but also even the sort of immigration officers in every country can just know what to look at on the passport and be like, yeah, this is a valid identity for this person.
Yeah.
Because even though like the French passport, the Japanese passport, the Chinese passport, US, but they're all different in some levels. They contain the same information. And while
same
I wouldn't,
size, same chips.
same thing, right? So I wouldn't call them interoperable per se, but they're very similar. But digital identity, everybody seems to be building a digital identity system. Some of them are zero knowledge proofs, some of them aren't. How do we maintain consistency across the identity if we have billions of agents out there so that I can identify all of them and not just like some of them? How do you get this interoperability to work from the identity standpoint when every chain or every sort of agent that's out there may have a different way of identifying itself?
Okay, that's why we follow standards, just like the physical.
So that's what I want to know. Are there standards out there that everybody follows?
Like a W3C, the ID standard and the verifiable credential standard.
Perfect.
Those are the standards. You can create your own, different data inside, but there's the format, everything, how the machine to read. It's the same standard. So there's multiple standards, but it's a handful. So I think right now it's as long as every single country follow the same standard. So the verification part, for example, if there's an AI agent call from Japan to Hong Kong, right? The Hong Kong verifier actually, it's to accept that kind of call and verify it's a Japanese, legitimate identity. Then it takes a minimum effort, to modify the system to, adopt a Japanese, DID or digital identity, standard.
So identification and identification verification, obviously very important. But at the end of the day, if that agent is doing something for me or for you or for a company or for some other entity, right? Because the agent's not going to be operating in a vacuum. How do we know who's accountable for it if something goes wrong? Do you know what I mean? Because we talk about governance, but like, let me give you the perfect example. When I joined Morgan Stanley in Tokyo, back in the 90s or whatever it was, there was someone who did an FX trade and they did it backwards. You know what I mean? They were supposed to sell $100 million and buy yen, but they bought $100 million and sold yen. That's a problem. But we knew who was accountable. We knew who was accountable for it because she was sitting right there, right? But at the end of the day, if an agent had done that for some reason, like how do we know? Even if they had identified and that trade got done because the identity was confirmed, who's accountable and how do we assign that accountability in this case when things get super automated, right?
Okay, so first of all, accountability. First, the legal identity must be involved. Okay, because you need to prove who is who. You cannot say I have a Google account. Then it's not a legal identity is involved. So second one, when something bad or even illegal, it's for example illegal trading or money laundering, everything. Then you literally say, okay, it's an agent did something wrong. It's not me. Okay, but the agent is a machine. It's like the trader you mentioned. It blame the computer. Like, it's the PC did that. It's not me.
Right.
So then you need to have a legal process and legal linkage, which means, for example, if they post a video, you possibly know just the agent is KYC. It's fine, right? But if you trigger a financial action, it's not only KYC. It's also involve authorization. So this authorization must be given by a legal person to a KYC agent. So it's like a double or triple kind of safeguard to trigger a financial transaction. Then when something bad happens, it come back. There's no dispute. You did this. Okay, you authorized the agent. Even you made a mistake, but that mistake is human. It's not a machine. Don't blame the machine. So that system right now actually is we are going to set up in China, and also we are helping some European bank to set it up and doing POCs to see the whole flow. Because right now it's very new, and even the central bank don't have answers.
No, they don't.
When agent trigger payment and what requirement you need in order for that transaction goes through.
Do we have a situation, I'm just trying to think of one off the top of my head, but do we have a situation where an agent may be working for 2 or 3 different individuals at the same time? And if we do, like, how does that level of complexity get affected on both the identity side, but on the permissioning side? Or is it just so cheap to run an agent, which I don't think it is, that you just have one for everybody? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I really don't think that case it will be popular. It's like a computer shared by 3 people, but there's always a ownership, right? There's always a ownership, legal ownership. So this computer belong to who, and who have access. The computer could belong to a company. Okay, that's a legal ownership, but it could be 5 employees to access it. Then there's a legal structure and the company policy to identify, whoever did wrong. So there's always, a for that.
And what about governance? Like, how does that work? How do we control, like, all these things that are associated with governance in real time as these billions of agents are kind of running around and working in the financial system?
Yeah, that's actually the fundamental question. Nobody really cares in the agent world yet, because everybody try to occupy the market with features. So the governance, security, and the identity, very few people really care in the space. There are some academia, people care about that. But so I think the governance also, there's multiple layers. First, every nation will have a governance policy legislation to basically govern AI agent behavior and action and accountability. Okay, there will be laws in every single country to do this, especially when governance continue. Also, there's corporate layer. So which means for some large corporations, they probably have like 100,000 agents, cross global, all their customers, employees, everything. Then they need to have a corporate policy how to, govern the agent behavior, trigger action, what services you can perform, what you cannot. This is a policy level and also technical level. Then each individual, you also need to be responsible. For example, for me, I have 3 computers. I have like a dozen agents, coding agents, different agents. So I need also manage them, their behavior. That's my personal responsibility. So it's like my PC, different layers.
So if someone like you is running 3 computers and 12 different agents, and if you're operating in the financial system, like, the more agentic AI stuff that you're using, the more expensive it becomes. How are we handling the sort of cost and the infrastructure that's associated with using this technology, particularly now that it's relatively new still, and we don't really have 100% control over what that cost is going to be? How are we dealing with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, right now for agents, the cost literally is a token to the large model, right?
For sure.
So yeah, and luckily there's multiple choices. So for example, I think they will compete with each other, and the price will go down and go down, go down. So I think that will be the trend. But right now, for example, doing codings, we actually use like 3 to 4 different models. The cheaper one doing the math work, but the smarter one is doing the analysis, planning, everything. So we actually use multiple agents to do different part of the work to control the cost. So there will be process and the product to to handle those things.
So tell me how this works in the real world. How do you determine what a less expensive model should do versus what a more expensive model to do? And how do you make the distinction between, oh, this is easier, and then this is more complicated and harder, so our orchestration layer is going to push this over to, I'm just going to make something up, right? This gets pushed over to Quen, and this gets pushed to Fable 5. Okay.
So first, the planning and putting the strategy and the process together is always the most complicated, because it's literally create from nothing to something, right?
Yeah.
So that one we always use the most capable one, even no matter how expensive they are, right?
Got it.
So but when the execution doing like a coding, I need to write another 30,000 lines of codes.
Right.
That's if I use the most expensive one, probably $100. I use the cheaper one, it could be $5. but
Yeah.
the quality is only 10% difference. So of course I use a cheaper one. Then of course after that we use the expensive one and the smarter one to do code reviews, right? So then fix that 10% to 3%. Then okay, it's a. So I think everybody is learning.
So essentially, what you're telling me is some guy in a Subaru does the shopping, but if it's like an urgent delivery, the guy in the Ferrari picks it up and then drives it to the person who needs the stuff that the Subaru did for shopping. Is this what we're suggesting?
Yes, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Oh my God. Are companies ready for this?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
of
Are
course.
most companies out there that want to employ this technology, are they ready for it from an infrastructure standpoint or not?
I think they have to. The competition will, force them to adopt AI, much faster. I mean, this is, we really think the AI thing, it's like the engine, invented like 150 years ago. Right? It's a, the agent, the machine actually, human beings, took like 50 years to fully adopt that, right?
Yeah.
But I think the AI thing, it's like the engine for data, engine for minds, right? But the effects, the benefits, people see immediately. I mean, we literally didn't do any, agent coding, the end of last year to nobody doing coding anymore in my company. No human coding.
So that's the last thing I was going to ask you before I let you go. Are you aspiring to do completely agentic coding? Are you already there? And if you're already there, what do the people that were engineering and coding before doing? Are they doing code review?
Planning. I mean, we actually first in my company today, nobody do human coding anymore.
Nobody.
Even one. I don't allow them to do. Actually, nobody even want to do that anymore. So right now, all the development process is change.
Wow.
Okay. And one thing I want to say is, the labor cost is cut into half.
Interesting.
Okay. I don't right now as a company owner, I don't even care, how much money revenue it can generate. Immediately benefit is how much cost I can cut.
Interesting.
Immediately.
Okay. Yifan, look, thank you so much for coming and doing this today. It's very, very interesting stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. Thank you again for coming to ATP Insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It was my complete pleasure.
Okay.
Bye for now. Okay, everybody, that is it for today's ATP Insights. Thank you again for all of the people. We had a really great crowd today. Thank you again for joining us today. Give us a thumbs up on our video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. The more comments we get, the more interactivity we get, the happier we are. We love doing this. We had a ton of people actually watching with us today. Thank you again for all of our guests too. My name is Michael Waitz. I'm going to say goodbye for now.